Go beyond Venezuela, there's a lot of clouds on the national security front, and I know you don't want to be a commentator. However, you must have noticed the Twitter war going on in this country, and there was concern from a senator who happens to be the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that we are on the brink of World War III, and that was over the top, possibly rhetoric. But how concerned are you, and what are you most concerned about?
Look, there are a lot of things that are concerning in the world right now. I think that this is probably the most uncertain moment in sort of international relations since the end of the Second World War. This is
the most uncertain moment.
I think so.
Wow.
I think we are seeing, after World War II, we had this tremendous moment of building up the international institutions that governed the 70 plus years of post-World War II prosperity. Institutions like the GATT, followed by the WTO, the United Nations, the World Bank, the IMF. And these can sound like very boring and bureaucratic and stuff, but they have been the foundations of a world that, particularly for the transatlantic nations, has really worked, and which with time has embraced more and more people into a peaceful, prosperous world. It's been great, and that order is starting to fracture. And I think as a result, we're seeing tensions in lots of different places. North Korea, very clearly, that's something Canada is very concerned about. We're a Pacific nation as well.
Let's talk about North Korea. Is there any bright spot on that? There are some people who think that China's reaction to North Korea has actually evolved in the last many months. Maybe you feel differently.
No, I very much share that view. I do think that, and we have been working closely with the United States, with Secretary Tillerson, and I do think that China has been taking stronger steps relative to North Korea than it has for some time. The Chinese support for the Security Council resolutions is a very positive thing. And I think it's very important to build that sort of broad international support and to apply that pressure. I also think with North Korea, it's important to keep some lines of communication open. Ultimately, what I think the whole world needs is a diplomatic solution to the crisis there. And it is possible to have some conversations. We recently, we had a terrible case of a Canadian missionary who had been imprisoned in North Korea, Pastor Lim, and our national security advisor was recently able to travel to North Korea. We don't have diplomatic relations with them, but he was able to travel to North Korea and secure Pastor Lim's release. I spoke with the North Korean foreign minister about that in Manila in August. So, we have to start building places where we can have dialogue, even as we apply serious pressure and say, this is not acceptable. Our countries are facing a threat, and we can't live with that.
What have President Trump's tweets, what has been the impact both on the dynamic with Korea and the uncertainty that you talked about earlier?
I said, Nina, that my job here was not going to be to offer commentary on other countries' conduct of foreign policy. But let me say about North Korea. I do think that going back to your question, something that we have heard American diplomats speaking about, I think, is true, that we have seen a shift in the Chinese position. I spent quite a bit of time with Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, in August, and China now wants to get to a solution there. I think we have to maintain the pressure, maintain the diplomacy, and build up some networks there. And again, a very concrete example of where the Chinese are now playing a positive role is their support of those Security Council resolutions. And we have to remember that Chinese support is not just symbolic, because those Security Council resolutions chiefly have an impact on the Chinese relationship with North Korea. So having China involved is absolutely essential. I would be the last person to say this is a problem which is solved or that we are there yet. But I think some progress is being made, and we all just have to stay united and keep on pressing really, really hard. The one other thing Sometimes when we talk about North Korea, we Canadians and Americans who now find ourselves, maybe in striking distance of those missiles, can forget to mention the South Koreans. And they, of course, are the country the most exposed. I think it's very important to be working closely with that government, which obviously knows North Korea the best. We have a very good relationship with the foreign minister of South Korea is a woman, so that's also great. She's very smart, and we need to be working a lot with the South Koreans because if we're feeling anxious about North Korea, imagine how the South Koreans are feeling right now.